The Spirit's Book, containing the principles of the Spiritist doctrine concerning the immortality of the soul, the nature of spirits and their relationships with humankind, moral laws, the present life, the future life, and the destiny of humanity, according to the teachings given by highly evolved spirits through several mediums, received and coordinated by Allan Kardec. Part 2. The Spirit World, or the World of Spirits. Chapter 5. Spirit Life. Errant Spirits.
Does the soul reincarnate immediately after separation from the body?
Sometimes it reincarnates immediately, but most often after an interval of longer or shorter duration. On more highly evolved worlds, reincarnation is almost always immediate. Since the corporeal matter of those worlds is less coarse, an incarnate spirit enjoys nearly all of its spirit faculties. Its normal state is the same as that of your lucid somnambulists.
What becomes of the soul during the intervals between incarnations?
It becomes an errant spirit aspiring to and awaiting a new destiny.
How long may such intervals last?
From a few hours to thousands of centuries. Strictly speaking, there is no outside limit assigned to the errant state. It may last for a very long time, but never forever. Sooner or later, a spirit always has the opportunity to begin another existence, which serves for the purification of its previous ones.
Does the length of the interval depend on the spirit's own will, or can it be imposed as an expiation?
It is a consequence of its free will. Spirits know full well what they are doing in prolonging it, but for some, extending it is also a punishment inflicted by God. Others ask for it to be extended in order to pursue studies that cannot be done productively except in the spirit state.
Is the errant state in and of itself an indication of spirits who are less evolved?
No, since there are errant spirits of every degree. Incarnation is the state that is transitory, as we have already stated. In their normal state, spirits are disengaged from matter.
Could we say that all spirits who are not incarnate are errant?
Those who must reincarnate, yes, but the pure spirits who have reached perfection are not errant. Their state is definitive.
How do errant spirits learn, since it can hardly be in the same way as for us?
They study their past and seek ways to evolve. They watch and observe what is going on in the realms through which they pass. They listen to the discourse of enlightened individuals and the counsels of spirits who are more evolved than they are. And this provides them with ideas that they do not yet possess.
Do spirits retain any of the human passions?
Upon losing their corporeal envelope, high-order spirits leave base passions behind and retain only the ideals of the good, but low-order ones retain their passions. Otherwise, they would belong to the first order.
When they leave the earth behind, why don't spirits abandon their base passions, since they are able to see the trouble they can cause?
On your world, there are persons who are excessively jealous. For instance, do you believe they will lose that defect upon leaving? After they leave the earth, since they are not entirely freed from matter, especially those who have displayed strong passions, they retain a sort of atmosphere around them that is infused with all their bad qualities. They only occasionally glimpse the truth, so as to have the moral path revealed to them.
Can a spirit progress while in the errant state?
It may improve itself a great deal. It always depends on its own will and desire. However, it puts its newly acquired ideas into practice only during corporeal life.
Are errant spirits happy or unhappy?
Their degree of happiness or unhappiness depends on what they have merited. They either suffer from the passions whose essence they have retained, or they are happy according to their degree of dematerialization. In the errant state, a spirit realizes what it lacks in order to be happier. Thus, it searches for the means to attain it. However, it is not always permitted to reincarnate when it wants to. This in itself is a punishment.
While in the errant state, can spirits visit other worlds?
That depends. When the spirit leaves the body, it is still not completely disconnected from matter, hence it still belongs to the world on which it has lived, or to one of the same degree unless it has progressed sufficiently during its lifetime. Progression is the purpose to which it must hold, for it will never perfect itself unless it progresses. Nevertheless, it may go to certain more highly evolved worlds, but as an outsider, it can get only glimpses of such worlds, and these glimpses are what drive it to improve itself so that it may become worthy of the happiness enjoyed on them and to be able to inhabit them later.
Do spirits who are already purified ever go to less evolved worlds?
They frequently do so in order to help such worlds progress. Without these spirits, these worlds would be left to themselves without guides to direct them.
Transitional worlds.
As some have stated, are there worlds that serve as layovers and resting places for errant spirits?
Yes, there are worlds that are intended particularly for errant beings, worlds that they may temporarily inhabit, a type of campsite, a place where they can repose during a very long errant state, a state that is always somewhat wearisome. These are intermediary positions between worlds and are gradated according to the nature of the spirits who have access to them and where they will enjoy a greater or lesser sense of well-being.
Can the spirits who occupy such worlds leave whenever they wish?
Yes, spirits who temporarily inhabit those worlds can leave them to follow their destiny. Imagine them to be like migrating birds that land on an island in order to regain their strength before continuing on their way.
Do spirits progress during their layovers on these transitory worlds?
Certainly. Those who gather on them do so with the purpose of educating themselves in order to more easily obtain permission to go to better and better places until they reach the position of the elect.
Due to their special nature, are these transitional worlds destined forever to be layovers for errant spirits?
No, that function is only temporary.
Are they inhabited by corporeal beings at the same time?
No, their surface is barren. Those who inhabit them do not need anything.
Is this barrenness permanent, and is it connected to their special nature?
No, their barrenness is only transitory.
Then are these worlds destitute of natural beauties?
Their nature is expressed in the beauties of infinite space, which are no less admirable than what you call natural ones.
Since the state of these worlds is transitory, will the earth be among them someday?
It already has been.
At what period?
During its formation.
Perceptions, sensations, and sufferings of spirits.
Once in the world of spirits, does the soul still have the perceptions it had in this life?
Yes, and others that it did not have because its body was like a veil that obscured them. Intelligence is a natural attribute of the spirit, but it is expressed more freely when it is unshackled.
Are the perceptions and understanding of spirits unlimited? In other words, do they know everything?
The nearer they approach perfection, the more they know. If they are high-order spirits, they know much. Low-order spirits are more or less ignorant on all subjects.
Do spirits have a more correct and precise idea of the present than we do?
More so or less so, just as someone who sees clearly has a more correct idea of things than a blind person. Spirits see what you do not see, and they judge differently than you. But once again, it depends on how evolved they are.
How do spirits have knowledge about the past? Is such knowledge unlimited for them?
When we concern ourselves with it, the past is present, precisely in the same way you remember something that has impressed you during your exile. However, since we are no longer hampered by the material veil that clouds your minds, we remember things that have disappeared from your memory. Spirits, however, do not know about everything, especially their own creation.
Do spirits who have reached perfection possess complete knowledge of the future?
Complete is not the right term because God alone is sovereign. No one can equal God.
When a low-order spirit says that a thing is forbidden or permitted to it by God, how does it know that the order has actually come from God?
It does not see God, but senses this divine sovereignty, and when something must not be done or when a word must not be spoken, it receives a sort of intuition, a secret warning which keeps it from proceeding. Don't you yourselves have presentiments that are like secret warnings to do or not to do something?
The same happens with us, but to a higher degree. You should understand that since the essence of spirits is more subtle than yours, we can more easily receive divine warnings.
Is the order transmitted by God directly or through other spirits?
It does not come from God directly, because to communicate with God directly, one must deserve it. God transmits divine orders through spirits that are more evolved in purification and instruction.
Is spirit's sight circumscribed as it is in corporeal beings?
No, it resides within the entire spirit.
Do spirits need to move about in order to see in two different places? For instance, can they see what is happening simultaneously in two hemispheres of the globe?
Since spirits travel at the speed of thought, we can say that they see everywhere all at once. Their thought can radiate and be directed to many points at the same time. But this faculty depends on their purity. The less pure they are, the more limited their sight. Only the high-order spirits can see everything as a whole.
Is the hearing faculty like that of sight in their whole being?
All perceptions are attributes of the spirit and are part of its being. When it is clothed with a material body, perceptions only arrive through organic channels. In the state of freedom, however, they are no longer localized.
Since the perceptions are attributes of the spirit itself, can it stop using them?
A spirit only sees and hears what it wants to. At least this is generally the case, especially for more evolved spirits, because less evolved ones frequently must hear and see what may be useful for their improvement, whether they want to or not.
Are spirits sensitive to music?
Do you mean your music? What is that kind of music when compared to celestial music, that harmony of which nothing on earth can give you an idea? One is to the other what the primitive chant is when compared with a soft melody. Nevertheless, ordinary spirits may take a certain pleasure in listening to your music because they are not yet able to appreciate anything more sublime. For spirits, music has infinite charm due to their highly developed, sensitive qualities. Of course, I am referring to celestial music, which is everything the spiritual imagination can conceive of as the most beautiful and delicate of all.
Do spirits experience our physical needs and sufferings?
They know about them, for they have endured them, but they do not experience them physically as you do because they are spirits.
Do spirits feel fatigue and the need for rest?
They cannot feel fatigue as you understand it, and therefore they do not need corporeal rest because they do not possess organs in which the energies must be restored. However, spirits do rest, meaning they do not remain in a state of constant activity. They do not act in a physical way because their action is entirely intellectual and their rest is entirely mental. There are moments when their thought decreases in activity and is no longer directed toward any object in particular. This is a true repose for them, but it cannot be compared to that of the body. The kind of fatigue that spirits can experience is in proportion to how evolved they are. The more purified they are, the less rest they need.
When a spirit says that it is suffering, what is the nature of such suffering?
Mental anguish, which tortures it more acutely than physical suffering.
Why do some spirits complain about the cold or heat?
It is a remembrance of what they suffered during their life.
a feeling as painful as the reality itself. Frequently, they use this expression for lack of a better one to express their situation. When they remember their body, they experience a sensation similar to when you take off a heavy coat. Immediately afterwards, you continue to feel its weight on your shoulders.
Theoretical essay on sensation in spirits.
The body is the instrument of pain. If not its primary cause, at least its immediate cause. The soul has the perception of such pain, and this perception is the effect. The memory that it preserves of pain can be very acute, but this does not imply any physical sensation. Actually, cold and heat cannot disorganize the soul's tissues. A soul can neither freeze nor burn. Every day, do we not see the memory of or the concern about a physical ill producing its effects, even to the extent of causing death?
No, I'm not dead.
The choice of trials.
While in the errant state and before a new corporeal existence, does a spirit have the awareness and foresight of what will happen to it during its new lifetime?
The spirit itself chooses the kinds of trials it will undergo. Its free will consists in doing so.
Then is it not God who imposes the tribulations of life on it as a chastisement?
Nothing happens without God's permission, because it was God who established all the laws that govern the universe. You may as well ask why God made such and such a law instead of some other one. In giving a spirit freedom of choice, God leaves to it the entire responsibility for its acts and their consequences. Nothing stands in the way of its future. The path of the good or the path of wrongdoing is an open choice. If the spirit succumbs to its trials, there is still the consolation that not everything is lost, because God, out of divine goodness, allows it to start over where it failed. It is necessary to distinguish between what is the work of God's will and what is the work of human will. If a danger threatens you, it is not you who have created it, but God. However, you have willingly exposed yourself to it because you saw it as a way to advance, and God has allowed it to happen.
If our spirit chooses the kinds of trials it will undergo, are all the tribulations of life therefore foreseen and chosen by us?
Not all of them, because it cannot be said you have chosen and foreseen every single thing that happens to you in the world down to the smallest detail. You have chosen the kinds of trials. The details are consequences of the position you have chosen, and frequently of your own actions. If a spirit chose to be born among wrongdoers, for example, it already knew what kind of temptations it would face, but it did not know how it would act in any given situation. Its actions are the products of its volition or free will. In choosing a particular path, a spirit knows it will have to endure the struggles that arise thereon, and it knows the nature of the tribulations it will encounter, but it does not know what events await it. The details spring from circumstances and the force of things. Only the major events that will influence its destiny are foreseen. If you walk down a path full of ruts, you know you must be very cautious because you run the risk of tripping. But you do not know when you will trip, and maybe you will not trip at all if you are sufficiently on your guard. If you are walking down the sidewalk and a tile falls on your head, you must not think that it was written beforehand, as it is commonly said.
Why would a spirit want to be born among wrongdoers?
It has to be sent into the environment in which it can experience its requested trial. To this end, it must find an analogous situation. For example, in order to struggle against the instinct of thievery, it must dwell among thieves.
If there were no longer any wrongdoers on earth, would spirits not be able to find the necessary conditions for certain trials?
And would that be something to regret? That is what happens on highly evolved worlds, where evil has no access. Thus, only good spirits dwell on them. Use all your efforts to ensure that the same happens as soon as possible on your earth.
In the trials it has to undergo to reach perfection, must a spirit experience every type of temptation possible? In other words, will it have to go through all the circumstances that can trigger pride, jealousy, greed, lust, etc.?
Of course not.
You should be aware of the fact that there are those who from the beginning have taken a road that has spared them many trials, but those who allow themselves to be led down the road of wrongdoing risk all its dangers. For instance, a spirit may ask for wealth and it will be given. Then, depending on its character, it may become greedy or wasteful, selfish or generous, or it may indulge in all the pleasures of sensuality. This, however, does not mean that it had to experience all those tendencies fatalistically.
How can a spirit who at its origin is simple, ignorant, and inexperienced, consciously choose an existence and be responsible for its choices?
God compensates for its inexperience by outlining the path it should follow, as you do for a child from birth. However, as the spirit's free will develops, God gradually leaves it the freedom to choose its own way. It is at this point that the spirit will choose the wrongful path if it does not listen to the advice of good spirits. This is what we may call the fall of man.
When a spirit enjoys its free will, does the choice of its next corporeal existence always depend solely on its own volition, or can it be imposed on the spirit by God's will as an expiation?
God knows how to wait. God never hastens expiation. Nevertheless, God can impose a certain existence on a spirit when, due to its impurity or ill will, it is not capable of determining what would be most useful, and when God sees that such an existence could serve for its purification and advancement, and at the same time its expiation.
What guides a spirit in choosing the trials it wants to bear?
It chooses what may serve as an expiation according to the nature of its wrongs and whatever might enable it to evolve more quickly. Some spirits may impose a life of poverty and hardship on themselves in order to try to bear it with courage. Others may wish to experience the temptations of fortune and power, which are much more dangerous than poverty, because of the abuse and ill use that may be made of them, and because of the base passions they encourage. Still, others may desire to be tested in the struggles they will have to bear in the contact with various vices.
If some spirits choose contact with vice as a trial, are there others who choose it out of affinity and the desire to live in surroundings that cater to their tastes, or where they may give free rein to their materialistic tendencies?
Of course there are, but only among those whose moral sense is still underdeveloped. The trial derives from this, and they must endure it for a longer time. Sooner or later they will understand that satisfying their crude passions has deplorable consequences, which they will have to endure for a period that will seem like an eternity. God may leave them in this state until they have understood their wrongs, and then ask for the means of redeeming them through profitable trials.
Wouldn't it be natural for a spirit to choose the least painful trials possible?
For you, yes. For the spirit, no. Once it has freed itself from matter, illusion disappears and it thinks differently.
Can a spirit choose its next corporeal life during its present one?
Its desire may have an influence depending on its intention. In the spirit state, however, it frequently sees things quite differently. It is the spirit as such that makes the choice, but even so, it may make it during its material life, because the spirit always has moments in which it is independent of the matter it inhabits.
Don't many individuals desire greatness and wealth, but not as an expiation or a trial?
Undoubtedly, it is the flesh that desires greatness and wealth in order to enjoy them, but it is the spirit that desires them in order to experience the tribulations they can cause.
Until it reaches the state of perfect purity, does a spirit have to constantly undergo trials?
Yes, but they are not as you understand them. You call material tribulations trials, even though it may not yet be perfect. A spirit that reaches a certain degree does not have any more trials to endure. However, it always has non-suffering duties consisting in helping others to improve themselves. These will, in turn, help it evolve further.
Can a spirit be mistaken as to the effectiveness of a trial it chooses?
It may choose one that exceeds its strength and then it fails at it. It may also choose one that will
not be profitable at all. For example, a kind of idle and useless life. In such a case, however, upon returning to the spirit world, it realizes that it has gained nothing and asks to make up for lost time.
Why do persons have certain vocations or the desire to follow one career instead of another?
It seems to me that you can answer this question yourselves. Isn't it the result of everything we have said about the choice of trials and the progress accomplished in a preceding existence?
When a spirit in the errant state studies the conditions that will enable it to progress, how could it possibly imagine it could do so by being born among cannibals?
Spirits who have already advanced are not born among cannibals, only those of the same nature as cannibals, or those who are even less evolved.
Can spirits who come from a world that is less evolved than Earth or from a much less advanced people such as cannibals be born among civilized people?
Yes, there are those who err by wanting to ascend too quickly, but they are out of place among you. They display habits and instincts that clash with yours.
Could a person belonging to a civilized culture reincarnate into a less advanced one as an expiation?
Yes, but it would depend on the kind of expiation. Masters who had been cruel to their servants might become servants themselves and suffer the harsh treatment they used to inflict on others. Those who gave orders at one time might, in a new existence, obey those who formerly bent to their will. This would be an expiation if they used to abuse their power, and God can impose it on them. Furthermore, a good spirit may choose an influential life amidst such a culture to enable it to advance. In that case, it is a mission.
Relationships beyond the grave.
Do the different orders of spirits establish a hierarchy of powers, and is there subordination and authority among them?
Very much so. Spirits have authority over one another relative to their degree of evolution and exert it through an irresistible moral ascendancy.
Can low-order spirits evade the authority of those who are more evolved?
I said irresistible.
Do the power and influence that individuals enjoy on Earth warrant them any supremacy in the spirit world?
No, because the lowly will be exalted and the great will be abased. Read the Psalms.
How should we understand this exalting and abasing?
Don't you already know that spirits are of different orders according to their merits? Well then, the greatest on earth may be in the last class among the spirits, while their servants may be in the first. Don't you understand this? Didn't Jesus say, "Whosoever humbles himself shall be exalted, and whosoever exalts himself shall be humbled"?
Don't those who were great on earth but find themselves abased among the spirits feel humiliated?
Frequently they feel greatly humiliated, especially if they had been proud and jealous.
After a battle, does a soldier who meets his general in the spirit world still acknowledge him as his superior?
The title is nothing. True superiority is everything.
Are the spirits of different orders mixed together?
Yes and no. That is, they may see each other, but they are distinguished from each other. They avoid or approach one another according to the similarity or dissimilarity of their sentiments, as is also the case amongst you. It is an entire world in and of itself, and yours is only a dim reflection of it. Those of the same order are drawn together by a sort of affinity, and they form groups or families of spirits united by sympathy and purpose. The good ones by their desire to do good, the bad ones by their desire to do evil, by shame for their wrongs, and by the need to find themselves among others like them.
Do all spirits have mutual access to one another?
The good ones go everywhere. It must be this way in order to bring their influence to bear upon the bad ones. Nevertheless, the realms inhabited by the good ones are forbidden to the imperfect ones, so that the latter cannot bring their passions there.
What is the nature of the relationship between good and bad spirits?
The good ones seek to combat the bad tendencies of the others in order to help them evolve. It is a mission.
Why do certain low-order spirits take pleasure in inducing us to commit wrongs?
They do so out of spite for not having deserved to be among the good ones. Their desire is to prevent inexperienced spirits as much as possible from attaining the supreme good. They want to make others experience what they themselves are experiencing. Don't you see the same amongst yourselves?
How do spirits communicate with one another?
See and comprehend one another. Speech is material. It is a reflection of the spirit. The universal fluid establishes a constant communication among them. It is the vehicle for the transmission of thought, as the air is for you the vehicle for sound. It is a sort of universal telegraph line that connects all worlds, enabling spirits to communicate from one world to another.
Can spirits disguise their thoughts and hide themselves from each other?
No, everything is out in the open for them, especially when they are perfect. They may be apart, but they always see each other. This is not an absolute rule, however, since certain spirits can very easily make themselves invisible to others if they deem it useful.
Since spirits no longer have a body, how can they establish their own individuality and make themselves recognizable to others around them?
They establish their individuality by means of their perispirit, which makes them distinct from one another, as do bodies among humans.
Do spirits recognize each other after having lived here on Earth?
Yes, and thus from generation to generation.
How do those who knew each other on Earth recognize each other in the spirit world?
We see our past life and read it there as if it were a book. As we watch the friends and enemies of our past, we also witness their passage from life to death.
Upon leaving its mortal remains behind, does the soul immediately see the relatives and friends who preceded it into the spirit world?
Not always immediately. As we have already said, it requires some time to recognize its situation and shake off the material veil.
How is the soul received upon its return to the spirit world?
The soul of the just as a beloved and long-awaited brother or sister, the soul of the wicked as a despised being.
What sentiment do impure spirits experience at the sight of another bad spirit who has just arrived?
Bad spirits are pleased at seeing beings who resemble them and who are deprived, like they are, of infinite happiness, just like on earth. It is a rascal among equals.
Do our relatives and friends sometimes come to meet us when we leave the earth?
Yes, they come to meet the soul they love. If it has escaped the dangers of the road, they congratulate it as though it were returning from a journey, and they help it to break free of its corporeal bonds. It is a blessing granted to good spirits when those who love them come to meet them. On the other hand, those who are blemished remain in isolation or are surrounded only by spirits like themselves. It is a punishment.
Are relatives and friends always reunited after death?
That depends on how evolved they are and the path they are following for their advancement. If one of them is more advanced and progresses more quickly than the other, they cannot remain together. They may see each other occasionally, but they will not be reunited until they can walk side by side or when they have reached equality of purification. Moreover, being kept from seeing relatives and friends is sometimes a punishment.
Sympathies and antipathies among spirits. Eternal halves.
Besides a general sympathy 40 that results from various similarities, are there special affections among spirits?
Yes, just as among humans. However, the link that unites spirits is stronger in the absence of the body because they are no longer exposed to the vicissitudes of the passions.
Will two beings who were enemies on earth retain their resentment in the spirit world?
No, they will understand that their hatred was senseless and its motive childish. Only imperfect spirits retain a sort of animosity until they are purified. If it was nothing more than a material interest that had separated them, they will no longer think about it, no matter how little dematerialized they are. If there is no antipathy between them, and if the cause of their dissension no longer exists, they can meet each other again with pleasure.
Is the remembrance of the wrongs that two individuals have committed against each other an obstacle to their sympathy?
Yes, it makes them keep their distance from each other.
What sentiment do those whom we have wronged in this world experience after death?
If they are good, they forgive you according to your repentance. If they are bad, they may hold on to their resentment and at times even pursue you in another existence. God can allow this as a chastisement.
Does the affection that two beings had for each other on earth always continue in the spirit world?
Yes, of course, if it is based on true sympathy. However, if physical attraction has had more influence than sympathy, it will cease with the cause. Affections among spirits are more solid and lasting than on earth because they are not subject to the whims of material interests and self-centeredness.
Are souls who must get together predestined for such a union from their origin? And does each one of us have, in some part of the universe, our other half, whom we will someday inevitably join?
No, there is no particular and predestined union between two souls. Unity exists among all spirits, but in different degrees, according to the order they occupy and according to their degree of purification. The greater their purification, the more united they are. All the ills of humankind are born from discord. Concord gives rise to complete happiness.
In what sense should we understand the term other half, which certain spirits use to designate sympathetic spirits?
The expression is imprecise. If one spirit were another spirit's other half, it would be incomplete when separate from the other.
When two perfectly sympathetic spirits are united, will they remain so throughout eternity, or can they separate and unite with other spirits?
All spirits are mutually united. I am referring to those who have already reached perfection. In less evolved spheres, after a spirit has improved itself, it no longer has the same sympathy for those whom it has left behind.
Are two sympathetic spirits each other's complement, or is such sympathy the result of perfect affinity?
The sympathy that attracts one spirit to another is the result of the perfect harmony of their tendencies and instincts. If one of them were necessary to complete the other, it would lose its individuality.
Does the affinity needed for perfect sympathy consist only in a similarity of thoughts and sentiments, or does it also consist in a uniformity of acquired knowledge?
It consists in the equality of their evolution.
Could spirits who are not sympathetic today become sympathetic later?
Yes, all will be someday. Thus, when a spirit who today inhabits a certain less evolved sphere is perfected, it will reach the sphere where the other dwells. Their reunion will occur more quickly, however, if the more evolved spirit has remained at a standstill because it has poorly borne the trials to which it submitted itself.
May two sympathetic spirits cease to be sympathetic?
Certainly, if one of them is idle.
The remembrance of corporeal existence.
Does the spirit remember its corporeal existence?
Yes, having lived many times as a human being, it remembers what it has been, and I assure you that sometimes it laughs, pitying its behavior.
Does the memory of its last corporeal existence completely and unexpectedly return to the spirit after death?
No, it returns little by little, like something that appears out of the fog, and to the degree that the spirit fixes its attention on it.
Does the spirit remember all the events of its life in detail, assimilating the whole in one retrospective glance?
It remembers things according to the consequences they hold for its situation as a spirit, but you should understand that there are circumstances to which it attributes no importance whatsoever and which it does not even try to remember.
Could it remember them if it wanted to?
It can recall the minutest details and incidents, events, or even thoughts, but when such has no usefulness, it does not do so.
Does it see the purpose of earthly life in relation to its future life?
Assuredly, it sees and understands it much better than when it lived in the body.
It understands the need for purification in order to reach the infinite, and it knows that during each existence it frees itself from a few impurities.
How does its past life unfold in its memory? By an effort of the imagination or like a picture it holds before its eyes?
Both ways. All the actions that it has an interest in remembering are as if they were present. The others remain more or less at the back of its memory or are entirely forgotten. The more dematerialized it is, the less importance it attributes to material things. You often evoke an errant spirit who has just left the earth and does not remember the names of the people it has loved or the details that seem important to you. That is because it is no longer concerned with them, and they have fallen into forgottenness. What it remembers very well, however, are the main events that have aided in its progress.
Does the spirit remember all the lives that preceded the one it has just left behind?
Its entire past unfolds before it like the legs of a journey. However, as we have already stated, it does not recall all its actions with absolute precision, and it remembers them only according to the influence they have on its present state. As for its earliest existences, those that may be regarded as the spirit's infancy, they are lost in the void and disappear into the night of forgottenness.
How does the spirit regard the body it has just left behind?
As an ill-fitting garment that has inconvenienced it and which it feels happy to have gotten rid of.
What sentiment does it experience at the sight of its body decomposing?
It's almost always indifference. It is a thing it no longer cares about.
After a certain amount of time has elapsed, does the spirit recognize its bones or other things that had belonged to it?
Sometimes, depending on the more or less evolved way in which it regards terrestrial things.
Does the respect we have for the material things that a spirit has left behind attract its attention to them, and does it regard such respect with pleasure?
A spirit is always happy at being remembered. The things we save that once belonged to it awaken its memories, but it is the thought that attracts it to you and not the objects themselves.
Do spirits hold on to the memory of the sufferings they bore during their last corporeal existence?
They frequently do, and this memory enables them to better appreciate the happiness they now enjoy as spirits.
Do humans who were happy on earth miss the pleasures they left behind?
Only low-order spirits could miss the pleasures which correspond to the impurities of their nature and which they must expiate through suffering. For more evolved spirits, eternal happiness is 1,000 times preferable to the fleeting pleasures of earth.
Do those who have begun great works intended for a useful purpose, but which they see interrupted by death, lament at having left them unfinished?
No, because they understand that others are meant to complete them. On the contrary, they try to influence other human spirits to continue them. Their aim on earth was the wellness of humankind. That aim is the same in the spirit world.
Do those who leave their works of art or literature behind retain the love they had for them during life?
Depending on how much they have evolved, they often judge them differently and frequently disapprove of what they most admired.
Does the spirit still have an interest in the works that are being done on earth for the progress of the arts and sciences?
It depends on how much it has evolved or on the mission it may have to fulfill. What appears magnificent to you is often a small matter indeed to certain spirits who admire it like a scholar admires the work of a student. They examine only that which can demonstrate the elevation and progress of incarnate spirits.
After death, do spirits retain their love for their native land?
It is always the same principle. For high-order spirits, their native land is adverse. On earth, it is the place in which there is the greatest number of people sympathetic to them.
Do spirits' ideas change in the spirit life?
Very considerably. Their ideas undergo large modifications as they become more dematerialized. They may sometimes hold on to the same ideas for a long time, but little by little the influence of matter diminishes,
and they see things more clearly. It is then that they seek ways to improve.
Since the spirit had already lived the spirit life before its incarnation, why is it so astonished when it re-enters the spirit world?
That is only the effect of the first moments and the state of confusion following its awakening. Later, it recognizes its state completely as the memory of the past returns and the impression of terrestrial life fades away.
The commemoration of the dead. Funerals.
Are spirits sensitive to being remembered by their loved ones on earth?
Much more than you may suppose. Being remembered adds to their happiness if they are already happy, and consoles them if they are despondent.
Does Memorial Day hold a more solemn meaning for spirits? Do they prepare to visit those who pray over their remains?
Spirits answer to the call of thought on that day, as on all others.
Is it for them a meeting day at their gravesides?
They assemble in greater numbers on that day because the number of persons who call to them is larger, but each one only pays attention to its friends and not the crowd of indifferent people.
In what form do they come, and what would they look like if they could make themselves visible?
They would look like they did while alive.
Do forgotten spirits, whose graves are not visited by anyone, come despite that fact and feel troubled at not seeing any friends remembering them?
What is the earth to them? They are only linked to it by the heart. If no one loves them any longer, there is nothing that can make such spirits feel connected to the earth. They have the whole universe before them.
Does a visit made to its grave provide more satisfaction to a spirit than a prayer made on its behalf in someone's home?
A visit to its grave is a way of showing that one is thinking of the absent spirit. It is the exteriorization of the thought. I have already told you that it is the prayer that blesses the act of remembering. The place itself is of little importance if the prayer comes from the heart.
Do the spirits of individuals who are to be honored with statues or monuments attend the inaugurations and watch them with pleasure?
Many watch them when they can, but they are less sensitive to the honors paid to them than to the memories.
Where does the desire come from where certain persons wish to be buried in one place rather than in another? Do they return to it with more satisfaction after death? And is the importance given to a physical thing a sign of a spirit's impure nature?
A spirit's affection for certain places is a sign of moral impurity. What does one piece of earth represent more than another to an evolved spirit? Doesn't it know that its soul will be reunited with its loved ones, even though their bones may be far apart?
Should gathering together the mortal remains of all the members of a family be considered meaningless?
No, it is a pious custom and a witness to the sympathy of loved ones. If such gatherings mean little to spirits, they are nonetheless useful to humans. Their memories are better concentrated.
Is a soul that has returned to life as a spirit sensitive to the honors paid to its mortal remains?
When a spirit has already reached a certain degree of purification, it has no more earthly vanity, and it comprehends the futility of all these things. Nevertheless, you should know that there are spirits who, in the first moments of death, take great satisfaction in the honors paid to them. Others become troubled if they see that their envelope is being forgotten, because they still hold on to some of the prejudices of this world.
Do they feel flattered by a large gathering at their burial?
More so or less so, according to the sentiments of the people gathered there.
Does the spirit attend the meetings of its heirs?
Almost always. God wills it for its instruction and as punishment for guilty ones. It is there that the spirit judges what its heirs' declarations of affection are really worth. All sentiments become patent to the spirit, and the disappointment it feels in seeing the greed of those who divide up the spoils makes their true sentiments very clear. However, their time shall also come.
Is the instinctive respect of people for the dead in all times and among all cultures the result of the intuition of a future existence?
It is its natural consequence. Without it, such respect would have no meaning.